How's it going? Okay. Today, we're going to look a little bit at some presentations given by students. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this presentation here. So this is a project that we used to do where we had students build a trebuchet or a catapult, and then they would give a presentation about the project. We haven't done too many presentations yet, but we'll learn a little bit about it right now. Here they start off with, of course, this title slide. I usually prefer to have a little bit more information on the title slide. Of course, his name is here, but I have redacted that for privacy purposes. But Engineering 1000, you know, it's the class. It's a good thing to have on there. If it is a class name, I would capitalize that. But also I might name the school that you're at. Whenever you're giving a presentation for a class or for research or something like this, you will always put the school on your front slide. Because usually you'll be giving this presentation where there are lots of students giving presentations, maybe from different schools. But still, the school should be there. And oftentimes you might even name the teacher's name on the front slide or something like that. Certainly other things that would go on the front slide would be names of other people that are in your research group or in your project group. But there's also one other thing that I would recommend putting on a opening slide, and that is some kind of engaging imagery. It's very important that you just don't put words up on slides in PowerPoint. It's boring, and nobody wants to listen to a presentation that just has a bunch of words on slides when you just have words coming out of your mouth. The worst thing that you can possibly do is start a presentation and just read a bunch of words off the slides, which has a tendency to happen whether or not you have imagery. But it's much more powerful if you have images that help people to remember things, that get them interested, and have features that you can point out while you're talking about your project or whatever it is you're giving a presentation on. So the next slide that this student put up here is an introduction slide to catapults. What is a catapult? This seems a little overly simplistic to me for a college course, so I would probably give a little bit more detail, maybe have an image like this on the page and have a list of things that catapults have, so that you could point and then have little pointers to the different things in the image, so that you know that this is the lever arm of the catapult, and this back here is the setting mechanism, and then maybe you have an arrow pointing to some feature on the catapult that allows this thing to have power, which would be most likely some kind of elastic or tension. But here they just say that it's accumulated tension, accumulated tension is suddenly released, and it hurls some object. Well, that's, informative to a point, but it's not as informative as it could be. And when you have arrows pointing to things on an image, that's always a little more informative. Of course, if you're standing up here and you're pointing at these things as the presenter, you could make it into a much better presentation without having the arrows actually on on the presentation. So you could say, well, right here, this part is the lever arm, this part is the release mechanism, whatever. But that's kind of a choice on how you want to present. And then they have a history slide. So this is still kind of background. We have one part of the background that involves what is a catapult, one that involves history, and that's fine. Before we move any further, though, I would like to point out that maybe the people that are watching this presentation want to know where you're going. And so between your title slide and the beginning of your background slide, you might want to put in a table of contents or sort. We don't usually call it a table of contents in a presentation. Usually we'll call it an outline or something like that. But it's a good idea to tell the people you're presenting to where you're going to go with this presentation, how you're going to proceed, so that they can know what's kind of coming up. So we have, what is a catapult? We have history. We have another slide of history. I would tend to try to get these two slides combined onto one slide. And also, I would consider getting some imagery on here. Okay? So for example, here we've just got some, just some interesting little anecdotes about catapults, but they're not really necessarily kind of historical landmarks or historical dates or historical pieces of information. This is not really information that is not well known. Everybody knows these kinds of things. These ones right here are a little bit more. We have, the first catapult built in 400 BC that you could even look up that catapults were designed very early on, were used very early on, but they were perfected by a very famous mathematician, Archimedes. So Archimedes was able to build catapults that threw certain distances. He knew exactly how far they'd throw, so that he was able to aim them a little bit better. So instead of just random facts that maybe you kind of just either made up because you know that they're true, maybe start to look for some actual, if you're going to do a history, look for some actual little factoids from history that have dates, that have names, that have, something a little bit more than just, hey, catapults are cool, they've been used a long time. But again, imagery. If you talk about Archimedes, you could have a little picture of the bust of Archimedes, or you could have a picture of an old catapult. There are some old catapults that have been recreated from historical documents and everything else, or even prehistorical documents. So then he goes on to his design. Now, what kind of imagery would you put in the slide that says "My Design"? Yeah, I might have 3 pictures of the designs that I was kind of shooting for. The 3 that I was choosing from, and maybe even I talk about the ups and downs of these designs and why I chose the one that I did, and then I might have a final design picture. One thing that you do not want to do in these things is, first of all, you don't want to have typos. PowerPoint has spell check. Make sure that you're using it. But another thing is, you don't want it to just be a storyboard. This is what I did next. Once the catapult was completed, I began to test it. Well, first of all, there's 2 kind of typos in there. I began to test it, and I should be capitalized. And you don't need to tell us that there were a couple of flaws in the design. That's the title of the slide. You don't have to say anything on this slide. You could just have a couple of images with some arrows pointing to things and talk about the flaws in the design. You wouldn't have to have necessarily any words at all. So photographs at this point. Now, I've really just kind of hacked this thing to pieces. So now I'm going to point out something that is kind of nice. You are viewing this all the way across the state. And is it easy for you to see? Why is it so easy for you to see? Okay, so the text is not crowded on the page, it's not too small, right? Is there anything else that makes it easy to see? Absolutely. We usually write on paper using, colors on white paper because we have white paper, right? Have you ever been to a restaurant or some other business that uses chalkboards or these new kinds of chalkboards that are backlit? They're out there. There are now these, they're kind of like whiteboards, but they're blackboards. And when you draw on them, you get colors, bright colors on a black background, or white on a black background. And it works really well, right? So this is a very good, and this wasn't an accident. This is something that I teach my students, that when you are presenting, the best way that you can present is to have a dark background, either black or a dark blue or something like that. I wouldn't go with much else besides black or dark blue. You could get away with a really, really dark green maybe, but probably not. It turns out that green and red are colors that the human eye struggles with. If you're colorblind, for example, green looks brown, and so does red. And so it's difficult for people who are colorblind to look at those colors and to be able to perceive things with them. So black, dark blue, those are very good colors for most people. And when I mean dark blue, I mean like navy blue, it's almost black. Those are good colors, and I wouldn't use a lot of designs in your background. Some people like to use the designs that are available in PowerPoint. And so I would avoid most of those, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But dark background with a brighter foreground is ideal. Now, as far as the foreground, the best color you can go with is usually white. Okay? Some people like to say, yellow, we've got these neon greenish yellow is perfect. It's supposed to be so easy to see. Well, the reason they use those colors on like ambulances and fire engines is because they're annoying colors. And the human brain hates to see them. And so it gets your attention. You don't want that kind of vibe going in your presentation. You want to avoid yellows, you want to avoid red, and you want to avoid green. Those kinds of colors are not good colors for the brain. Okay? So white is really your best color to use in a presentation with a dark background like a dark blue or a black. You can see again that he's got fails in design twice, and again I think that you could combine those two slides with maybe an image and some arrows pointing to it and get all that out in one. But if you're just doing this, you're probably just reading these fails, in the design. 2 fails in the design and then fixes for the fails once again. If you're going to rebuild something, show how you rebuilt it. Take a picture. And this is one of the reasons that I have you guys doing your log books. Okay? So that you have images and that you have notes, that you know what you've done, you know how you design things, you know what the failures were, you know what you did to fix them. And so does everyone else, so that they can come back and reproduce what you did. And then the results. Right here would be a great place to have an embedded video. It's not terribly hard to embed a video into PowerPoint. It doesn't always work out the way you want it to, so it's good to have a backup plan. But you could also show your throwing range if you're throwing stuff, and you could show, where it hit or whatever. Or you could show something funny, like there's this great picture of this rich man in England who throws pianos in cars with his 35-foot trebuchet, or whatever it is. It's this monster machine that he throws huge things with. He fills pianos with gasoline, and he lights them on fire and throws them through the air. That'd be a great picture to show. It wouldn't really be directly related to what you did, but it would just be fun to get people the idea of what you're doing. So, and then they've gone through the design process, they've shown their results, and then they have a conclusion slide. And a conclusion slide can show, can have your conclusions for your research, conclusions for your project on it, but it should also probably include any resources that you used in your design process or in your project. And major resources, like if you went to Wikipedia to learn something, you don't have to put that on there. But if you were working from a website that had a bunch of designs, you might include that if you used one of their designs, or if you were using some kind of book about catapults. But also anybody that helped you with this project, anybody that helped you with materials, anybody that helped you with ideas, anybody that helped you to build it, you should give credit where credit is due to those people. Just have a little thanks and credits for those people at your conclusion. But again, imagery is very important. We had one image in this presentation, and even just talking about this presentation is boring because there's just nothing to do, nothing to see. Okay? Now let's see if I can find a different one here that has some more imagery in it really quick. I have to change my screen. Okay. Okay, this is one of my best students. Great student. Let's take a look at this one here. Okay. So this one was a hydraulic iron project, kind of like we're doing. And you can see that the beginning of this, this one is actually a recorded presentation. So I need to not start the presentation, I just need to, let's see, slideshow, from beginning. Okay, so you can see this one has Mid-Plains Community College, has the instructor, has the course on it and everything. It's going to move automatically, but now you can see that there are images. Now, of course, she's taken some images from the company that makes these things, but this gives you an overview of the presentation, and it gives you an image to give you an idea of what we're doing, an idea of what kind of thing you might expect in this project. Then, this student goes into a background of hydraulics, so it's facts, dates, names, and people and machines, right? First it starts off with this old hydraulics demonstration machine, and then it goes on to an actual hydraulics machine that's used in industry to lift things, a crane, right? Then this student goes on to talk a little bit about the science of hydraulics and gives a little, puts a little image in here. I believe this image came from one of our workbooks. If you're using an image that belongs to someone, you probably should give some credit there. So this one right here, you might put a little place in the just right under the picture, maybe right under the figure, just says where this picture came from. Came from www.whatever, or it came from this hydraulics workbook or whatever, and that's fine. But it gives you something to point at while you're talking about the different things that you're presenting. It's not just reading, you're actually got something to point to. And then the project specifications, and that's fine. That doesn't have an image, but that's okay not to have an image on every slide. You also notice that her slides are not black background, they're a blue background. They're also not using a white foreground. She's using yellow, and it works okay. Yellow works decently with blue, and that has something to do with the fact that they are, I believe yellow and blue are complement colors, aren't they? Something like that. Yeah. So complementary colors work fairly well with each other. I wouldn't do a green and red because of the color blindness thing. Green and reds are also complementary. But yellow does okay if you choose the right yellow. If the yellow starts to get too green or too bright, it really starts to be messy. But you can also see that this is maybe not as easy as the white on black. Are you noticing that? The yellow starts to get a little fuzzy if you look at it too long. Your eyes get tired of seeing it. Your eyes are extremely sensitive to yellow light, which is one of the reasons that you want to go with a very dull, very low brightness yellow, because your eyes can see yellow very easily, and if it gets really bright, it just overloads your eyes. Yellow is the color that your eyes see the best, that kind of a greenish yellow. That's because we live under a yellow sun, right? So anyway, but you also notice that there's a little bit of design in the slide. Just a very simple stripe on the right-hand side, or two stripes. That's not terrible. I think it can be a little bit distracting sometimes, but it's not terrible. Going to the design process, you can see here that there is a drawing here, and there are some different lists, some different kind of bulleted lists. You know, this slide is starting to get a little bit busy, but it's not out of control yet. It's not too bad. You can see that she's shown a picture of the syringes she used, and that's fine. And then you get to one of her design, her actual design here. And she shows the obstacles that she had to overcome, and also one of the failures. Her base wasn't strong enough, tipped it over. So she improves it by changing the base, and she's able to get some better results. And you can see her actually doing the activity, picking up this tennis ball and moving it. Then she has a final slide after her results with all the resources that she used, and a thank you slide, which is also pretty common. So, that is a pretty good presentation, I would have to say. That presentation would probably earn an A, whereas the previous presentation would probably earn a mid to low B, maybe even a high C. But, I mean, the information was there, but there just wasn't much to capture the audience to help them understand things. The imagery was not there. Imagery is important. Now, one thing that I've found a lot of with students is students will put a lot of imagery in, but it won't be imagery that's directly related to their project. They're just kind of throwing it in there thinking it's going to make the presentation good. That is not the case. Just random imagery does not help. You really want to have imagery that makes sense, that helps the discussion, helps the presentation along, and so on and so forth. So be aware of those things. Be aware of the background of your presentation. Be aware of the font and the colors of the font in the presentation. Be aware of the imagery and what you're going to say about that imagery. You want to write as little as possible you want on the slide, but still have enough on the slide that when people look at the slide, they kind of know what you're about to talk about. They don't know everything because you're going to say some things that maybe aren't written on the slide, but they have enough to be getting along with so that they're not just figuring it out as you speak. Okay? Some people want to surprise their audience. Engineers generally do not want to surprise their audience. They want to guide their audience and give them enough information to work along with them. If you're, Steve Jobs and you're unveiling the first iPhone, you want to surprise your audience. And if you look at the presentation he did back in whenever that was, 2005 or whatever it was, I think it was 2005, 2007, somewhere in there. But anyway, if you go back and look at his presentation, he actually jokes around with the audience a lot. His imagery is very simple. He writes almost nothing on those slides. And then the first image he brings up of the iPhone is completely fake. It looks like an iPod with an old dialer on it, with the old rotation dialer on it, and a handheld phone that was connected to the iPod. And it's a total joke because he was just toying around with the audience, trying to loosen things up a little bit. But then when he revealed that the iPhone was going to be the first smartphone without any kinds of buttons on the phone except, a button at the bottom for the home button, and it was going to be the first phone that had a big wide screen on it, and it was going to be all touch gesture stuff. I mean, people were really excited because it was revealed to them at the last second. They'd not seen it before. Nobody had seen it before. So it was a real surprise and really a good effect. We don't want that in engineering. That's for marketing. In engineering, we want to guide them along. We want to help them to understand things even maybe a little faster than we're presenting them, so that they're participating in the presentation, not just, absorbing things as we tell them to. So those are two examples, one at kind of the far end of the spectrum of not so good, one at the better, the far end of the spectrum for really good. And I will try to find one more that's kind of in the middle so that you kind of have the whole gambit here. Okay, so here's one that we can use. So this is another trebuchet project, and here you have black and white, and you can see that it's fairly easy to read. But if you were to judge just from this first slide, which was easier, black and white or white on black, which one was easier? Yeah, the white on black doesn't wash out the words so much. You get a little bit of washing out of the words effect here, where the white tends to almost blur out the words because it's so bright. And so I think that, and most people agree, that a dark background with white is the best. However, this student is using a very easy to read font. It's a font without serifs, so it's like an Arial font or a Tahoma font, or I think Calibri or Cambria. I think Calibri is a non. But anyway, one of these non-serif fonts that doesn't have little things on the letters on the bottoms, little legs on them or whatever. It's just very simple, very blocky, very easy to read. And we go right into, right here you can see his name was on the front here, but I took it off. But there's no other information, no school, no class. We've got a good start with the goals for what we need to do, but we've not got an overview slide or an outline slide. And we're going right into slides with lots of words, no imagery, but then eventually we have one with some imagery. Now the downside to some of this imagery is that he's zoomed in really, really close so that you can only see one side of the trebuchet. You can only see the side of the trebuchet that has the weight in it. The other side of the trebuchet is not there. Here we're showing the middle, and here we're showing the top. But I'd like to see something that shows the whole thing, right? And we're not seeing that. Also, these pictures, these images, are kind of dark. You can see that he's done it in a dark room where there's some bright light coming in, and that washes out things in the image. So you have to have a little bit of skill with photography also. You have to understand what makes a good picture. And what makes a good picture in photography, if you look at photography of the masters, like Ansel Adams or other, anybody really. You could look at George O'Keeffe if you want. It doesn't matter who you look at for great photographers. The frame of the picture, in other words, the entire picture, is filled up with things of interest. There's nothing in the picture that's not of interest to the photographer. A lot of people, when they take pictures, they'll have a picture of somebody. A good example is when you go on vacation. You're taking a picture of Mount Fuji or something. And so they'll stand way back so they can get the mountain and everything around it for miles and miles. And then they'll put somebody in the picture, a little tiny image of a little person in the picture, And all you've got really is a big picture of a bunch of stuff you're not interested in. The only thing you're really interested in the picture is the person that you put in the picture in the mountain. When you really should have maybe zoomed in or stepped forward a little bit and got just a picture of the mountain so that the mountain fills the entire frame of the picture, or the person and the peak of the mountain fill the whole frame of the picture. Something needs to fill the frame. Now, he's done a good job of filling the frame, but he's overfilled the frame because not everything of interest is in the picture. So he's overdone that. What you really would like in this situation is to have the entire thing fitting in the picture and not very much else in the picture. It's a bit of an art, which is why photography is an art. But having 3 different pictures of 3 different parts of the trebuchet is not very effective, although he does have pictures here, which is good. What's missing? What's missing are maybe a little list of things that he wants to talk about in this picture, so that the people doing the presentation, watching the presentation, can know what he's going to talk about here as he's talking about it before he talks about it. Okay? Same with these next 2. They're just pictures with no information besides the picture. You need to have a little bit of each. Okay? So then we have testing. We're going to watch the attached video file. That's a good thing too, but really you should talk about the results of your test. You know, did you achieve what you wanted to? Were there some setbacks with it, some things you should overcome? You should have a list of things here. And then the conclusion here is just a little paragraph where at the end of your presentation you should have a little bit more information than that. You should have some references. You should have some credits for people that you worked with, maybe, or resources you used, whatever else. So this one is kind of in between the 2. It's got pictures, but it's missing some information. It's got a decent background, but it could be better. Could be a darker one. If I remember correctly, this one was created using, instead of using PowerPoint, they were using Google Docs. I have nothing against Google Docs, but you need to make sure that you can know how to use it properly so that you can get things done in it well. I converted it to PowerPoint later. I prefer PowerPoint personally because it's just a product that is, Microsoft Office is a product that has been well designed over the years. It's one of the few things that Microsoft has done well over the years. But it has been done well over the years, so I recommend it. But those are some different presentations that hopefully will give you some guidance on how to start preparing your presentation. Now remember that on Wednesday, let's make sure that I've got my timetables right. Wednesday, we are slated to finish up this project. Oops. So today is the 31st, and Wednesday we're slated to finish up the hydraulic arm project so we can start SketchUp on Friday, Monday at the latest. So you should be getting pretty close to done with building. And you should start testing and start putting together a presentation once you've got everything ready for that. Are we on track for that, or do you need anything from me? Good. Okay, good. So write that up and get a presentation started. Turn in the presentation as soon as you can. For anyone else who needs help from me or anything else that I can help you with, please contact me as soon as possible and get your logbook completed and your presentation completed, and we will check up again on Wednesday to make sure everything is good. Now, one more thing that I want to make sure that I can't remember if we talked about this, but when you build your presentation, you can actually give you can actually record your presentation. We did talk about this, I think, but I can't demonstrate it very well here on this computer, except just to show you how it's done. You open up your project and you've got your slides here, and once you've got all your slides done, then you can record your presentation by going up to slideshow and hit record slideshow. Make sure that you have a microphone that allows you to record sound, and then you will start your recording, start the recording here, and you will go through the slideshow, talking, go to the next slide and whatever else, and then do it all the way till you're done, and it will record all the way through it, and then save. You have to save it after that. So you go back up here and you save the slideshow, and we'll save everything, including the recording, okay? Once you have done that, you should open it up again. You should close it all the way out, open it up again, and make sure that it recorded. So that you go back to your PowerPoint. You open it up. You open up your presentation that you just did, and then you press play on the slideshow. So you go up to slideshow, and instead of hitting record slideshow, you'll go from here and you'll go over here to say where it says from beginning, start from beginning, press play there, and it will play the slideshow with the sound and everything. Make sure your speakers are turned up. And what you'll see when you do that is something like this. Let's see. Well, I guess I can do this one. I go to slideshow, play from the beginning, but I have to, that's not going to work. This one didn't have a recording. I have to go to my sound and turn off the mute, first of all. Let's go to okay, let's close this. Okay. Okay, so I believe that this one has a recording, so I'm going to go to slideshow, and I'm going to go from beginning. I'm going to turn up my volume.
Present a PowerPoint presentation over my hydraulic arm project. We'll begin with an overview. First, I will tell you a little bit about hydraulic systems and provide a little background information by telling you about the history of hydraulics and how hydraulic systems work. Next, we review the project specifications, and I will then step you through the design process.
Okay.
After that, we will look at my trials and alterations, and I will...
Let's see. So anyway, that's how it goes. You can see that it records and then it moves the slides for you and everything after you've done it. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but that particular student was not just reading off the slides. She did say some things that were on the slides, but she also had a little bit of other information. So it's a good idea to have kind of a script ready, but it's also good to not necessarily read that script. It's a good idea to practice what you're going to say, but not always say the same thing. To be a little bit open, a little bit open-ended, and to leave a little space when you're saying things. Many students, when they first start presenting, think that if they stop talking, something's wrong. It's not true. Leaving a little white space or blank space while you're speaking is very good. It allows people to think about things, to maybe jot down some notes. So consider those things as you're preparing your presentation and recording your presentation. It may take 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 or 6 recordings to really get it right, but I would recommend practicing and seeing if you like it, playing it for someone else and getting their feedback, presenting it in front of somebody else and asking what they think about your presentation. And if you would like to record it and send it to me and ask for my feedback, you are welcome to do that. And I will gladly give you some feedback and help you to improve your presenting skills. If you're going to do that, please send it to me before Wednesday so that I can review it and send it back to you before Wednesday. Are there any other questions or concerns for this? Okay, we will meet again Wednesday, and I will see you later.